Welcome back, Phoenix, to Clarity Chaos. I'm Dave Campbell, CEO of Campbell Management Consulting. We're here every Monday night from 7 to 8 on KFNX News Talk Radio 1100. If you'd like to join the show, the call-in number is 602-277-5369, or toll-free is 1-866-536-1100. We're talking with Susan Bittersmith about business regulations and their effect on small businesses. And before the break, we were talking about the 20 top 10 business regulations or regulations to get rid of that certain small business. And here's a good one. Number 8, phase out incandescent light bulbs. And this goes back, like we were talking about before the break. When they came up with this genius idea, it killed the light bulb industry in the United States, and it's now been all shipped to, guess where? China.
Your favorite location. Well, and it also increases the cost, as we're talking about the cost of goods sold. Anything that requires the use of a light bulb, you now to operate that, it costs you more. That item is a much more expensive item. And you're right, the manufacturing component, and it's kind of the old buggy whip concept, is it's been replaced something else, and it can't be manufactured here, so we're now really dependent upon the Chinese for that particular implement.
You know, and it's interesting because the bill's called the Energy Independence and Security Act.
Which makes us dependent on a foreign country.
Which makes us dependent, and we lose security because we've shipped all of this overseas. It just, these guys are just... the intelligence is just overwhelming.
Part of the problem, I believe, is that the natural tendency in the base of elected officials are folks that have never really run a business. They may talk like they've run a business, and they may be a practicing attorney, or again, no disrespect to those professions, because I share some of that educational background, but they're not having to meet a payroll every 2 weeks or once a week. And so the concept of what all of these hidden implications are really never comes to be grasped. And it certainly doesn't happen on the agency side because those folks have never run businesses.
Oh, no.
They maybe find people, and they go to work every day and they do their best that they can do. But if they don't have that kind of background, they have no ability to understand what the implications of the decision are.
I think they're wonderful, but a lot of them come out of academia. And a lot of this is theoretical, pie-in-the-sky stuff, because they've never had, like you said, they've never had to do something on a day-to-day basis.
And don't understand where all the dots connect. It goes back to the EPA and my little favorite rant about the Navajo generating station, or they want to shut that plant down because it's coal-fired. Oh, but wait a second, it already has scrubbers, so there aren't any NOx emissions to worry about. And, oh, wait a second, the employees there are all Navajo Indians, so that means if it shuts down, by the way, the coal comes from the Hopis. Nobody thought through all of the things that might happen if they go off, on their tangent. The same is true on some of their educational.
Well, the same thing is at Four Corners. I worked at Four Corners for a long time.
It's on the same list, same problems.
Oh, I know. And I worked as an operator at Four Corners, and this was, my goodness, back in the 70s, so 30 years ago, and they had the technology then because we maintained the monitoring on the stacks and everything else.
Well, and in fairness, Four Corners doesn't quite have the scrubbing system in place yet that Navajo does. Right. They've agreed to do that, and yet it's still on the hit list.
Right.
That's the frustrating component, and you can talk to folks in other parts of the country as well. In the Great Lakes region, they've had issues with water quality components for the lakes. They want to cut down the ability to actually use those as a transportation mechanism to move goods, which is a cheaper way to do it than to use other kinds of transport. So the cost of goods sold goes up again because we have this ridiculous rule because people sitting in a suburb of Washington, D.C., where they've always lived, have never been to the Great Lakes, they've never been to the Four Corners area, they've never been to the coast of California.
You know what we could do? We could go back to horses and kerosene lamps. I think that'd be great. That way we could go back, that way the communications would be 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 days because we'd be getting mail by Pony Express and everything, and we wouldn't have this instant communications or anything else because there wouldn't be any damn electricity.
Because we've had too many rules to stop that. And so, again, it goes back to this component is that we have to start taking ownership and communicating and raising a fuss.
Here's another good one, appliance energy standards. The cost of battery chargers, ceiling fans, central air, clothes dryers, just about anything, all the way down to, even toilets. Just about anything is going up.
Well, and that's the risk of focusing on the toilet idea, but the low flush toilet issue, which, yes, has some water savings, but incrementally, there's requirements to do that. The cost of housing and retrofitting hotels. I mean, great idea, but if it's done in its own time by private sector initiatives, will not automatically increase the cost of doing business. And there's just no understanding of the two connections.
You know, here's a good one, the CAFE standards on the automobile industry. It sounds wonderful, the CAFE standards and everything else, but they don't ever talk about these little Priuses and what happens in an accident.
Which then relates to insurance costs, to medical costs.
Right.
Yeah,
the unintended consequences of any of this stuff, it seems like they can't think from the beginning to the end. They come up with what they think is a great idea to solve something, and they implement it. But nobody's talking about what the end result is.
And again, the nexus to all these kinds of regulations that you've been referencing is the bulk of these are agency-generated rules and regulations, not congressional pieces of legislation or congressional mandates.
These are all done by fiat.
Right. And so when you talk to a member of Congress about these problems, well, yeah, you're right, but so-and-so did that, EPA did that, our Highway Administration did that. Well, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the appropriation that funds those agencies that makes those rules. And I guess if there were one single message that could be delivered to a member of Congress is no longer is there a good excuse to say that's an agency or somebody else did that, because you are as you said, the keeper of the checkbook, and that's the controlling entity.
You know, and I don't understand, and I hate to belabor this, but I don't understand why they don't exercise their power.
It's one of my frustrations too, and obviously has driven many of us to try to make those changes. And I am not unrealistic to suggest that one person of 435 can make a difference.
I think they can.
Immediately, but we got a whole lot of them.
Got a whole lot of them.
35 that just went, who I think went with good intentions and with a message behind them. They just need to show courage and stand up and say, we can't sit around and wait for the same old to happen. Now is the time, and exercise that quickly.
And here's a good one, and we've been talking about the EPA, and that's the EPA endangerment findings on the basis of carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases.
Yeah, and that's what's related to this whole energy plant issue that has implications far beyond just water delivery. It will really increase the cost of living to every single American.
Well, yeah, and they say the overall cumulative gross domestic product loss because of this could reach $7 trillion by the year 2029. $7 trillion, and annual job losses could exceed 800,000.
So much for the stimulus program.
Boy, that stimulated the hell out of something, man. I don't know what those 800,000 people are going to do, but you want to talk about unintended consequences. Let's see. Here's one of my favorites. Sarbanes-Oxley.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I deal with this on a daily basis. I'm sure you probably do as well. I'm now subject to those kinds of disclosures. So yes, I mean it particularly from the 501c6 community, the trade association community. Right.
I'm all for transparency and disclosure. That is a good thing. How that's done and the cost of doing that is where the hang-up comes.
Oh, it's amazing because and I don't know if everybody remembers, but Sarbanes-Oxley came out of the Enron fiasco and WorldCom when they both went under because of their financial dealings. But in the IT world, and just about any business now is under SOX review to do one thing or another, and it just adds a completely insane layer of things that don't any value to anything, really.
Paperwork again, cost of disclosure forms and other regulatory compliances that you have to do. But as you say, do not add back into the economic cycle. And I would contend don't actually do what was intended to be done, which is to create transparency and the ability to unravel and disclose information.
No, I mean, when you think real quickly, wasn't it IBM that just settled out of court for some SEC violations and stuff like that from an audit standpoint? If I remember right, I'm trying to remember. I thought I read something that IBM got themselves crossways. We're just about out of time, so I'm not going to go over all 20 of them, but I would like to thank you for being on the show and invite you back.
Anytime. I always appreciate being invited.
And maybe, are you going to go back to Washington soon?
I will be back in about 6 weeks. Same mission. We're organizing.
Well, cool. Maybe we can have you back and have another.
Give you an update.
How in the world it went.
I'd be happy to do that. We're organizing and being vocal and not letting officials not be accountable.
Yeah, we've got to. Everybody's got to get in front of these guys and make them accountable. Wayne, good show, bud. Thanks so much. Everybody out there, I want to thank you for inviting us into your home and listening. And I want you to remember one thing. Life isn't about waiting around for the storm to pass, but it's learning how to dance in the rain. So we got to get out there and get after it. We can't let this happen. I'm Dave Campbell, CEO of Campbell Management Consulting. Tune in next week on Monday night from 7 to 8 for more Clarity from Chaos on KFNX News Talk Radio 1100.